Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Raf speaking here, and today I'm very excited as this marks the debut, the very first episode of The Compound Show. Welcome once again. The Compound Show is a collaboration podcast presented by Vinny and Raf, yours truly, two guys from Brazil who want to share their views on investments, self-development, career, mental health, and a whole lot more. Our goal is basically to break the stigma around one's finance and advancing personal and professional lives as best as one can. So let's just quickly introduce ourselves, all right? Starting with my dear old pal Vinny. That's spelled V-I-N-I. Vinny, how are you today, man?
What's going on, guys? Feeling great. First podcast episode, so I'm feeling really pumped. So we've been planning to create this podcast for a while now, and I'm glad it's turning into reality. So allow me to introduce myself first. I'm Vinny, born and raised in Brazil, and now I work in the UK. So I've been investing in stocks, bonds, and other assets for over 10 years now. So I studied economics back in uni and really passionate about this subject, hence why I created a blog around it, and now I'm launching this podcast together with Raf. So the premise of the show is that becoming financially savvy is simple, but not necessarily easy. And we will digest that information for you.
All right, thanks for that. So, sweet. Back to me now, I guess. My name's Raf, short for Rafael. I'm also from Brazil, born and raised. I graduated in business administration with specialization in finance and accounting in Canada. I've moved back to Brazil and spent my entire career working with finance. So I don't have as much a background in investments or such a long journey as Vinny has. 10 years is pretty long for me, but I've always been in the finance world and I've worked in different kind of organizations, different profiles from bigger corporations that are multinationals all around the world, as well as startup companies, both in Canada and in Brazil. As I said, started my career in Canada as a postgraduate student, eventually got my first job and moved back to Brazil a few years back to continue my career here to this day. More details on that on future episodes, I guess. Can't spill it all at once, right? More specifically about the investment side, one of the things that we will cover very heavily here on the Compound Show. I first invested my money at the age 21 in government bonds, investment funds, as recommended by my then account manager back in Canada. Not knowing too much about investments, of course. And ever since then, started to gain more knowledge on the subject, started becoming more passionate about it, and invested my money in a range of different products. Learned a whole lot more about investments ever since, and continue to learn on a daily basis. It's all about compound improvements. That's key, right, Vinny?
Absolutely. So I hope to have great lessons to share with everyone listening to us today and onwards. And as well as hope to learn a lot from our listeners too. So through email, social media, and so on and so forth. So Raf, before we begin, is there anything that we want to share with our audience? I feel that perhaps it's important to set the tone and what they can expect from the first season of the Compound Show.
Absolutely. All right. So basically, I feel it's very important right now for us to make sure we set the tone, like you said, on what we will cover and more specifically, what we will not cover. I think they're both very important so that our audience understands what we're going to be talking about and how they can learn a little bit about our experiences and what we can expect to do here moving forward. So basically, we want to really have a focus here for everyone that's trying to really find more of a work-life balance in their career, progressing their career, thinking about how to choose what to do with their money, breaking that stigma around money, around that delicate subject, and basically talk about all the good, all the bad consequences that may come along with the choices that we make. I hope to have some great lessons to share here with everyone listening. I feel like we have a lot to say to inspire people, as well as a lot to learn from everybody as soon as we start interacting with everyone via email, social media, and so forth. All right. Before we begin, though, I feel it's also important, like I said, to set the tone on what we are not going to talk about on this show. So basically, I'm going to turn it back to you, Vinny, so we can maybe give our audience a little bit of the disclaimer that we have here to make sure that we cover what we're not going to be all about.
Sure. So back to me. The disclaimer is we are not certified financial advisors, nor do we play one on the internet. So do your own research and make your own decisions. Or if you're still uncomfortable with it, then speak to a professional before executing your investments. So everything that you hear here is not a recommendation on investments, but rather a reflection on the power of investments and choosing wisely what to do with your money. This is rather lessons that we learned through our own perspective and experiences thus far in our careers. So please guys, don't start investing on anything that you feel unsafe about it. Always search for more knowledge. So that's pretty much it. So I think without further ado, we can start the discussion. So the topic of the day is the high costs involving the purchase of a new personal phone today versus investing long-term for your future, opportunities and consequences of either choice.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks for both the disclaimer here and thanks for opening up the main topic today. I guess for us to start interacting here a little bit, Vinny, so we're talking about comparing cost, opportunity costs, decisions here, choices, right? Like we briefed everybody here in the intro. So we're comparing here more specifically some stock in the market, or what are we doing exactly?
So I think it's more about how we live our lives. So in a day, you make over 10,000 decisions in a day, and some of those decisions don't impact you as much, and others impact you quite a lot more than you actually realize. So one of the decisions that I want to talk about today is one-off purchases, right? So for instance, you and I, we have our own phones just sitting by our sides. So if you look at, for instance, an iPhone, one of the questions that I want to ask is, would you rather purchase an iPhone or Apple shares?
Interesting. Well, I don't have to know the answer to that in terms of financial results in my account versus out of my account, but I'm guessing that the right answer here is to say I'd rather have the Apple stocks, right? Do you have any numbers around that and why?
Well, let's put this way. So let's go back in the past. So you have the opportunity to meet Raf in 2008.
Ooh, that was a weird dude.
So yeah, so that very ugly guy. A lot of spots all over his face.
Can't avoid those.
With some bracelets maybe. So yeah, so you went and you met that guy. So would you advise him to purchase Apple shares then rather than his first iPhone?
Well, I definitely would.
That's interesting. What about you guys? Would you choose an iPhone or Apple shares? If you want to comment, just send us an email.
So if you want to get in touch with us, please send us an email with your response and your opinions, your suggestions, and so on and so forth. The answer to our questions, more specifically, to thecompoundshow@gmail.com. All right? Again, thecompoundshow@gmail.com. We'll try our best to get back to you within 48 hours so that we can keep going. All right, so according to what you're showing us here, so for everybody listening, we have our screen open, and what you're saying is that, for instance, if you would have invested a total of $499 back in 2007 to acquire the then brand spanking new 4GB iPhone worth, again, $499, that substituted by Apple shares would have gotten you 133 shares of Apple worth $3.75 each. Is that it? Yeah, I believe so. And that, in today's value, would amount to a total of $16,430.82. Wow. That is a whole lot of money compared to those $499 back in 2007, eh, Vinny?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you try to sell that iPhone back in the day, you probably won't get $10.
Yeah, I don't think so. Do you think that any of those old models, at least, they would go on like
Oh,
some kind of auction website for a lot of money?
Yeah, not for a lot of money. You would be able to recycle those phones. So if you Google recycling a phone near you, you can get $10-20 max on those phones.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Yeah, nothing for what you pay for. So I think there are a few lessons there. So first thing is the discussion around short-term reward versus long-term success, right? So
Yeah.
most of us, we've already heard, you and I have already heard about the marshmallow research, whereas kids that delayed their satisfaction were more likely to succeed in the future throughout their lives. And here's an example of short-term versus long-term planning. So short-term, obviously really great to have an iPhone. You can use a lot of its apps and a lot of assets that can bring to your life, but the question is, that short-term benefit that you get, is it worth to you as Raf the same as it would be worth $16,430 in your bank 13 years later?
Well, of course not, right? I guess the point here, I guess I'm assimilating at this particular point in time is that, I would have had a different option of a phone to get back then, where I would have perhaps spent half the amount or perhaps even less. After all, back then I was just a 17-year-old kid, and I didn't necessarily need to have the latest phone model that just recently came out, right? If I recall correctly, the iPhone from 2007 was the very first iPhone, right?
Yeah, it's the first thing. So
I remember even watching the conference live by Steve Jobs back then. It was incredible.
Yeah, but maybe Raf back in the day got a lot of girls because he had a new iPhone.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Back in Canada, yeah, those were the golden days. But of course not. Anyway, so basically, I guess, yeah, I would definitely value having those $16,000 in my bank account with the 30-year-old mind that I have today. That's a no-brainer for me. But I guess, when we're looking at the bigger picture here, there's a moral behind this, right? So the moral of the story is we talked about choice and making sure that going forward, we learn from these lessons. This is just an example. And what can we do knowing that, when you use this knowledge to, in the future, maybe make a different decision, you have a potential of having a great opportunity at hand. Of course, when we're talking about this particular example here, we're talking about Apple, specific shares at a very specific price, in a point in time where the company actually boomed because of the iPhone. It became the company it is today after that particular moment in time, I believe, too, after the iPod and all of that. But that doesn't mean there aren't going to be new opportunities for different companies and even for Apple itself. I'm sure that even today, as the Apple stock has risen to, a much more salty number for you to acquire one share, for instance, you're still expecting the company to continue to do well and to continue to increase its value in the marketplace, right?
Yeah, so I think this is more a factor of example. As you know, because storytelling is important so we can associate a lot better to what we do on a daily basis. I think, obviously as well, yes, that's absolutely true. iPhone was one of the reasons for the revival of Apple, because Apple has always been a great company, but went through bumps along the way. And the resurrection came through the iPhone and then later iPad and so on. But the point that I'm trying to make is there is always going to be an Apple. There's always going to be a stock that is high performing, just like Apple in those 12, 13 years. Went from Apple to Amazon to Netflix to Tesla, and now is Squares Inc. So there is always going to be a high performing asset, and it's usually not only one, it's multiple of them. The big question is, how do you save the money so that you can start investing? And then secondly, where to put your money.
Exactly. And again, right, we're also trying to be very keen on a very specific point here. This is Raf speaking. Hey, I'd rather have those $499 turned into Apple stocks when I think about it today. Of course, I know the results, but reminding everyone listening to us here, those $499 in any case that, wasn't necessarily a successful case could have gone down the drain too. It's a risk you're taking, right? It's just a matter of really trying to get into investments a little bit more, studying the company, studying the market and how to make decisions. So the Raf today that is learning here with Vinny and is learning through courses and through education, which is really important, knows that. So I guess that's the point we're trying to make here. We're using a very specific example with an Apple stock back from 2007. But like Vinny said, there's lots of Apples out there. Even Apple itself is still an Apple, as we just mentioned. So yeah, that's a great point.
Another thing to think about this is how the marginal utility of something, so that it's a lesson in economics, is that perhaps an iPhone doesn't give me the same benefit that it gives you. So there is someone in this planet that actually getting an iPhone back in 2007, 2008 would give that person more satisfaction than receiving $16,000 today. There are people that would be in that situation. So when we analyze examples like that, we need to bear in consideration the fact that everyone is different, and therefore the results and consequences of actions will vary from person to person. So I think that's also an important point.
Right. I guess no matter how much satisfaction a consumer good offers, in the long run, you'll always be better off financially by investing, if that investment does well, of course, rather than spending. The math behind the iPhone demonstrates that clearly, I would say. Of course, like you just mentioned, the utility and the enjoyment that users get out of products like the iPhone do have value, but from a strictly financial perspective, it pays to remember that consumer goods like iPhones and whatever other electronics out there will depreciate over time, while investments like stocks, houses, properties, and so forth tend to appreciate in value. And that's what we're trying to highlight here.
Absolutely. So now let's stop talking about Steve Jobs because the guy is already dead. So.
Oh man, too soon? Maybe too soon? We don't know. So what do you guys think?
So I suggest that we digress and go into a different example, which is the purchase of subscriptions.
Before we do that, I'd like to ask maybe just a follow-up question on the topic here, not to try to revive, anybody that's not here with us anymore. We may have to edit that out. It's not going to be very tasteful. But what about today then? Do you still trust this process using the specific example of an Apple stock? Why do I ask that? The Apple stock, the Apple share has appreciated in value ever since 2007. Don't know exactly what its cost is for one particular share at the very moment. But knowing that and knowing its track record, would you still rather get an iPhone's worth for the latest model? Or would you have the equivalent in Apple stocks today thinking of the long term?
You're asking myself.
Of course I'm asking you.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the audience. Well, in my personal case, Vinny, nowadays, 2021, I would have gone for the shares. Simply because the phone wouldn't get me much value back then.
Hater.
And yeah, I was just someone who played video games all day. So back then, the phone wouldn't get much value. And right now, with $16,000, I can buy 16 iPhones of the latest model.
Probably even more.
Yeah. So, for me, it's very clear that I would have, with the mind that I have today, and with the ambitions that I have today, I would have invested in shares. But it gets back to the point. Everyone is in a different situation. The point here is having the knowledge of both scenarios.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So what do you guys think? Please send us an email at compoundshow@gmail.com and tell us your thoughts. What do you guys prefer? Would you prefer having the latest, iPhone 12 is the current model? Would you rather have that today, 2021? Or would you rather actually have that amount worth of Apple shares, thinking long term and maybe looking at that value in the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now? Please tell us. All right, let's move on. So do we have anything else in today's agenda?
Yeah. Second point is purchasing subscriptions.
Subscriptions. All right.
Yes.
What kind of subscriptions?
Well, what do you have? Do you have gym, streaming service, clothing service, meal service, delivery? Oh, there's so many out there. I get lost.
Yeah, that's true.
So, the first thing is, do you know how much do you spend in subscriptions on a monthly basis? Question.
All right. Is that for me? Honestly, I guess I didn't win that one. But to be very, very honest, I like that question, particularly for me. I'm not sure how much I spend. I know what I consume. I mean, I've got Netflix going on. I believe I do have Amazon Prime.
I'll make the calculations.
All right. Don't forget that, as a Brazil tax resident, Netflix has just recently announced this week that some of its subscriptions, if not all, are going up in price by roughly 15 to 20%. So take that into consideration. I'm just saying that to make sure that you understand I'm really on top of my finances. Although I'm going to be guilty here at the end of the day. I know it. So we've got Netflix. We've got definitely Amazon Prime. We've got perhaps, what else? Gym. Definitely the gym. Spotify. Yeah, this is looking bad. I've definitely got YouTube Premium, so I've got some redundant subscriptions there already. But I believe it ends right there. Yeah, let's just not talk about money, because I'm going to be very depressed after you sum up that amount. Let's just talk about what not to do, shall we?
Okay. Well, my calculations gave me around $80 monthly. Is that fair?
Nah, I think that's too. Yeah. Okay. Am I paying that much? That's not good.
I don't know. Some of the subscription
Let's just hope
prices
you're wrong,
are just,
okay? Let's just hope you're wrong.
I just put it down how much I would pay by living abroad, but you may pay less. So a lot of people are in similar situation. I'm gonna use this number, so $80 per month. $80 per month. Obviously, he gets a lot of value from it, because who doesn't want Netflix during lockdown, right? Who doesn't want to get music via Spotify or YouTube Premium? Maybe choosing one of those would be a good start. Who doesn't want to have a gym to work it out? But I think the point we are trying to make here is that those things, they serve a purpose. But do you know how much you actually use them?
Yeah, that's a good reflection to have. I guess that's the point here, right? We're trying to make sure that we understand whether this actually provides any value to our daily lives, or whether we're just, signing up for these things, having some sporadic use here and there, and we get, sucked into it, paying for it monthly, spending all this money that we don't need to, right? We could be using it for other things. I'm definitely guilty of that. We just saw it, right? There's some subscriptions, I guess, that are redundant that I could consume. Perhaps, a Netflix, a YouTube, and a Spotify. Maybe just one of those would already, satisfy my needs. That doesn't mean this applies for everyone, right? Of course, this is just me, but I guess the point here is maybe we're subscribing to a lot of things that we don't necessarily have to. Is that right?
It's very easy to get into this, because subscriptions are so easy to kick off nowadays. And you're usually quite excited about the product that you're signing up to in the beginning.
Yeah.
But we all only have 24 hours in the day, and there's just so much you can do. So sometimes we ended up forgetting about what we actually signing up for and paying on a monthly basis. If it was one-off, you would be fine. $10 gone. That's fine. Let's move on. But $10 in a year,
How do we
$120.
fix that though? What's the thought process that you want to recommend here so that we may try to, be smarter about this?
Okay, I have a solution for this, I believe. The suggestion is to unsubscribe to all of your subscriptions and analyze throughout 30 days what you actually want to consume. In fact, take note of that. And once those 30 days end, you sign up again to the services that you actually want to. And the bonus part of that is that you can get the free trial for every single one that you re-sign up to it.
Well, that just became interesting, all right? That just became real interesting. All right, so I guess if I understood that right, what you're saying is basically, cancel all these services, try to think about it, have that real reflection for the next 30 days, see what you've missed, and sign up again, right? Sign up again in a way that, you're only going to really start consuming once more what you feel like really is important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a nutshell, A, having a minimalistic approach towards subscriptions, and B, cutting costs intelligently. You're still going to have the things that you enjoy, but you won't have the fat in your subscriptions anymore. You're cutting the fat.
Yeah, because we, at the end of the day, I guess, what we're trying to say here is that I really like the way that you said, we only have 24 hours in a day to really do the things we got to do, right? Not only the things we want to do, but of course the things that we need to do. And with that comes the very simple fact that, you can't consume all of this information, all of these services at once.
That's right.
So basically, I guess that gives you the opportunity to understand what we really don't want to give up in your life. And, we still have to be, how can I say it, satisfied with what we're consuming, with how we're feeling entertained on a daily basis. And, we're not trying to recommend here or say, you got to, unsubscribe to all these things. You got to cut these costs and not have any of that in your life. On the contrary, we're just trying to say, hey, maybe you don't need all of these things because you're not consuming them all, and it's just kind of a waste, right? To be very strict and to the point here. Is that a correct way of putting that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's precisely that. I think if you really look at your example, for instance, if you did the exercise, I would presume that you would either cancel Spotify or YouTube Premium. Netflix, you would keep it. Amazon Prime, maybe yes, maybe no. The gym, you would perhaps
I'm going to the gym.
Yeah, so you're going, so you would keep it. But just on what we talked about, you would save either $10 or $20 per month. And that in a year is $120 or $240 per year.
Right. Yeah, and that's, for someone that could be a lot of money. For the next person that may not be a whole lot of money. But I guess the point here that we're trying to make is really how we're making decisions, right? What impact that'll have for future decisions that maybe involve, a bigger sum. Or maybe really just finding out how you can introduce that thought, that methodology to your life, and making sure that, the decisions that you're making going forward always have that in the back of their mind. I feel that's really important. I never really thought about that in terms of subscriptions because, like you said, there's such small costs, right? But they add up. They really do add up. After a little while when you really look at everything that you've got going on.
Absolutely.
All right. So guys, once again, tell us what you think. We want to know. All right. Please send us an email at thecompoundshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, how you're feeling about these recommendations, how you're feeling about these experiences, and what your thoughts are on everything, right? Okay. All right, guys. Let's keep going. Do we have anything else we want to cover today?
Yes. We've got our third point, consumption. Now we're going to talk about the daily or weekly, maybe monthly consumptions that have become a habit and therefore are racking up huge pressure on your wallet. Okay, so one of those things that I always think about is the daily Starbucks.
All right. How so?
Well, because I love Starbucks. And
okay.
If it was just for me, I would take like 5 cups of coffee a day on Starbucks.
Jesus, you're one of those, aren't you?
Yeah, if it was just for me, yeah, I would do that.
I should have known when you took me last week to go get a coffee.
I love it. They even knew my name.
That's true. They did. The guy knew your name.
So, the thing is, getting a daily Starbucks, it's interesting, right? Because Starbucks for me is a way that I reward myself, right? I reward myself by getting a delicious cup of coffee. But at the same time, if I reward myself every day, 3 times a day, does that become a non-reward, right? Because will that become a given to my body because I'm already consuming that over and over again? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm really trying to not cut off the point you're trying to make right now, but I'm really seeing the connections already. We made a point in the very beginning here when we were talking about our iPhone example, and we talked about a short-term reward versus long-term success, and we're seeing that already, right? You're trying to make sure that you feel happy about something that you did. You're rewarding yourself with a cup of coffee in this example here for Starbucks, but rather this is impacting you financially, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Every Starbucks coffee costs about $4 or $5.
Yeah, don't know where everybody listening here is in the world, but normally Starbucks is a pretty, luxury kind of coffee wherever you go. It's not really the cheapest. You're paying a premium for it. I guess that's what we're trying to say here. Although it's a very good product, you pay for it.
So that racks up to about, $12 a day. $12 a day multiplied by 30. You know where I'm going. It's $360 per month on coffee.
Yeah.
So, yes,
I don't feel so bad about my subscriptions anymore. You should feel really bad.
No, I'm not saying that I'm doing that. I'm saying that I would like to.
I'm saying you're doing that. I seen it.
No. So, but let's talk about, John. So John goes on Starbucks and grabs a coffee a day. But John's is struggling financially. So what about if he reduced from a cup a day to actually when he wants to celebrate and reward himself, and maybe he can scale that down to twice a week? That would enable John to create a conscious decision-making process and at the same time create better habits that do not hurt his wallet and also reward him mentally for whatever he wants to celebrate, which is also important for mental health, showing gratitude. Wouldn't that be a better solution?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, I guess here, again, similar to what we were talking about earlier, right? We're not trying to say, hey, this is too much money, you don't want to do this. On the contrary, we're just saying, hey, maybe there's some decision making that can be adjusted here so that you can have a better habit in place, and that'll enable you to enjoy your cup of coffee that you like so much, and at the same time really enjoying that reward, right? Rather than having that become a habit because you just take that for granted. You're actually enjoying that on a reduced capacity to the point where you really appreciate it when it happens. And that, you try to enjoy a cup of coffee in a more cost-effective way, if you can say so, on other days of the week and so on and so forth. And that, that's just a coffee example, right? Think about how many things in your life that you can apply that concept to and maximize, your money, right? We're talking about money here at the end of the day. All the examples that we've given so far, if we add them up, think of how much money you can save on a 12-month period. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a common thread in every single one of those examples. It's the first lesson in economics. It's called opportunity cost. If you do A, then you leave the option of doing B. So you need to always select between multiple options across your day. And all of those purchases mean at the end of the day that you do A instead of B. So let's keep that in mind. And I think that is time for our conclusion of this episode.
All right.
So Raf, what did you learn today?
All right. So I guess if we can do a quick recap of what we talked about here. Basically, we're trying to make sure we have some criteria for what we do with our money, right? We're talking about money here at the end of the day. In our humble opinions, everything comes down to money coming in, money coming out. So we're talking about choice. The choices that you make. The choices that you made earlier should be nothing but lessons for your present and for your future. So we used an example for Apple shares. What would you rather, right? So again, please leave us your thoughts at thecompoundshow@gmail.com. Here, for me, as I've said earlier, I would rather actually have a more conscious decision made today, and I would rather invest my money instead and maybe have a secondary option with what I'm going to do in terms of having my mobile device. And basically, I understand that choices play a huge role when we're talking about, money that you're actually choosing to invest rather than choosing to spend. And further, we talked about different topics here involving, subscriptions, talking about consumption of different products using Starbucks. And that all comes down to really having a conscious decision-making process, creating a better habit so that we start going away from that short-term reward mindset and thinking more of a long-term success example where you're actually trying to make sure that you reduce what you're consuming immediately in such a dynamic, fast world that we live in, and trying to understand that we only have so many things that we can do in a day, in a week, in a month, and so on and so forth. If we try to apply that logic into our lives, I think we're going to be better off and we're going to have more money at the bank at the end of the day. I guess that's what I understood. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just remind ourselves that no money, no honey. And that's it for today.
All right. All right, guys. Thanks once again for joining us today in this very special, very first episode of The Compound Show. Please feel free to leave us an email with your comments, suggestions, anything you want to tell us about today's podcast, and what you would like to see us talk about in future episodes, all right? You can send us an email at thecompoundshow@gmail.com at any time, and we will do our very, very best to get back to you as soon as possible. Please be safe, everybody. We'll talk to you very, very soon. This is Raph from The Compound Show. Thank you very much for tuning in.
That's all, folks. Until the next episode.